An envelope arrived at Burbank Unified School District on a Monday morning in May 1971 with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $3,000 and a handwritten note, 2 sentences. The check was made out to the retirement fund of a third-grade teacher named Evelyn Marsh, who was leaving after 31 years. Nobody at the district knew who sent it. Evelyn spent the rest of her life trying to find out. Jefferson Elementary School sat on North Screenland Drive in Burbank, 3 blocks from the Warner Brothers lot and 4 from the NBC building, in a neighborhood where the industry and the ordinary life of a working city ran alongside each other without much acknowledgement of the proximity. Evelyn Marsh had taught 3rd grade there since 1940. She was 62 years old in the spring of 1971 and had spent 31 years in the same classroom. Room 7, south side of the building, the windows facing the playground, teaching 8-year-olds to read and write and add and understand that the world was larger than they currently knew, and that their job was to grow into it. She was not a celebrated teacher in the way that some teachers become celebrated. No awards, no profiles in the local paper, no reputation that extended beyond the parents and children who had passed through Room 7 over 31 years. She was simply a very good teacher who showed up every day and paid attention to every child and understood in the specific way of people who have been doing something long enough to understand it at its deepest level, that the work of teaching 3rd grade was not about 3rd grade. It was about the particular year in a child's life when they were old enough to understand that they had a mind and young enough to believe that the mind could do anything. Her job was to confirm that belief before the world had time to complicate it. She retired in June 1971. Her colleagues collected $340 for a farewell gift, a lamp and a card signed by every teacher on the faculty. The principal gave a speech in the staff room. Someone brought a cake. It was a good farewell, warm and specific and appropriate to 31 years of showing up. The envelope had arrived the week before, on a Monday morning in May. The district administrator who opened the mail that morning set it aside when she saw the cashier's check. $3,000 was not the kind of amount that arrived in the Monday morning mail without context, and called the district superintendent. The superintendent called the school principal. The principal brought the envelope to Evelyn. Evelyn read the note twice. She read it standing at the principal's desk with her reading glasses on and the envelope in one hand and the note in the other, and she read it twice and then set it down. The note said, "Mrs. Marsh, you stayed after school with me every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks in the autumn of 1955, until I could read the words on the page the way the other children could. I have not forgotten. I hope this helps. No signature, no return address. The postmark was Los Angeles, which narrowed nothing. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels." Evelyn had stayed after school with a great many children over 31 years. She stayed whenever a child needed more time than the classroom allowed, reading help, mostly in the early grades, when the gap between children who had been read to at home and children who hadn't was wide enough to determine the shape of everything that followed. She stayed without being asked, without making anything of it, and without keeping records of it, because keeping records would have made it a policy rather than a response, and she wanted it to be a response. She did not remember the autumn of 1955 specifically. She remembered the Tuesday and Thursday stays as a recurring feature of her school years, not as individual events. She had no way of knowing which child had written the note. She spent the rest of May trying to find out. She went through her records, the attendance books she had kept in a cardboard box in her garage, one for every year since 1940. She found the 1955 book and went through the class list. 24 names. She wrote them all down on a legal pad and began going through them one by one, looking for a child who had struggled with reading that autumn, a child she had kept after school, a child who might now be old enough to send a cashier's check for $3,000. She found 3 names that matched what she remembered, 3 children from that year who had needed the extra time. She tracked down 2 of them through the district records and through the telephone directory. Both of them were in Burbank or nearby. She called them, carefully, without explaining exactly why she was calling. Neither of them was the one. The calls were not easy to make. Evelyn was not a person who imposed herself on situations, and calling a former student after 16 years to ask, obliquely, carefully, whether they had recently sent a cashier's check for $3,000 was the kind of imposition that required preparation. She prepared carefully. She told each of them she was retiring and was thinking about former students and simply wanted to know how they were. She listened. She heard enough in each conversation to understand that neither of them had sent the check without asking the question directly. She thanked them and said goodbye. The third name she could not find. The family had moved. She remembered this now, once she saw the name in the attendance book. Sometime in 1956 or 1957, moved away from Burbank to somewhere she had never been told. The district records for that period were incomplete, and she was not entirely certain she was reading her own handwriting correctly from 16 years earlier. The name as she had written it could have been 2 or 3 different names spelled differently, and she had no way to confirm which. She put the legal pad in the cardboard box with the attendance books. She retired in June. She took the lamp home and put it in the living room and looked at it sometimes and thought about the note. She was not troubled by not knowing. She had received something genuine, a gesture from someone who had needed something from her once and had wanted, after 16 years, to say so. And the not knowing was simply part of the shape of it. She had done many things across 31 years that she did not know the outcomes of. Most of what a teacher did existed in a space where the outcomes were not visible and were never going to be. The note was unusual only in that it had come back at all. Most things didn't come back. She thought about it for 31 years. She told her son Michael about it the summer after she retired. She showed him the note. She'd kept it in an envelope in the drawer of her writing desk, along with the cashier's check stub from the bank. She had deposited the check and used the money the way she used money she had not expected, carefully, for things that mattered. A new roof on the house, a contribution to Michael's graduate school tuition. Some of it simply saved because she had grown up during the Depression, and the habit of saving unexpected money was one she had never lost. Michael read the note. He said, "Do you have any idea who it is?" Evelyn said, "I have 3 candidates. I found 2 of them. The third one I can't find." Michael said, "Do you want me to try?" Evelyn said, "I've been trying for a month. I don't think it can be found. Whoever it is didn't want to be found." The cashier's check was anonymous, no return address. They thought about it. Michael said, "Then why did they write the note?" Evelyn looked at it. She said, "Because they wanted me to know it mattered, but they didn't want anything back. Those are 2 different things." She put the note back in the drawer. She thought about it for the rest of her life, not obsessively, not as something unresolved that troubled her, but the way you think about a good thing whose origin you don't know, the way you receive grace without being able to trace its source. She mentioned it to people occasionally, to Michael, to a few close friends, to the women she played cards with on Thursday evenings. She always described it the same way. Someone from a long time ago remembered something small and wanted me to know. Evelyn Marsh died in April 2002 at 93. Michael sorted through her things over several weeks that summer. In the drawer of the writing desk, he found the envelope he remembered from 1971, the note, the check stub, the legal pad with the 24 names, and 3 of them circled. He also found, beneath them, something he had not seen before. A second envelope, sealed, addressed in his mother's handwriting to the Burbank Unified School District, and never mailed. Inside was a note she had written at some point over the 31 years, he could not tell when, to whoever had sent the check. The note said, "I don't know who you are, but I want you to know that I remember every one of those Tuesday afternoons. Not your name, I'm sorry that I don't. But I remember the afternoon in November when you read the page all the way through without stopping and looked up and didn't say anything. You didn't need to. I knew. That moment is why I did this for 31 years. Thank you for telling me it mattered. It was addressed to no one. It had never been sent. She had written it, sealed it, and kept it, because there was nowhere to send it to." Michael sat at his mother's writing desk with both notes in his hands for a long time. The note from 1971. 2 sentences, no signature, no return address. And his mother's reply, written to nobody, sealed and kept for 31 years because there was nowhere to send it. He thought about what it meant that she had written the reply at all. She had not written it as an exercise or as a way of processing her feelings about the mystery. She had written it because she wanted whoever had sent the check to know something, something specific, something she had been carrying since November 1955, something she had never had the occasion to say because the child who needed to hear it had moved away to Arizona and she had lost the thread. The moment in November when you read the page all the way through without stopping and looked up and didn't say anything. You didn't need to. I knew. She had kept that moment for 47 years. She had kept it the way teachers keep the moments that tell them why they do what they do. Not in records, not in documentation, but in the specific memory of a child's face at the precise instant when something that had been difficult became possible. Michael began trying to find the third name from the 1955 class list that autumn. He had advantages his mother had not had: the internet, access to records databases, a researcher friend at the Burbank Public Library who knew how to find things that had been lost. He spent 4 months looking. He had advantages his mother had not had: the internet, access to records databases, a researcher friend at the Burbank Public Library who had spent 20 years finding things that other people had given up on. He spent 4 months looking. He called 2 of his mother's former colleagues who had been at Jefferson in 1955 and 1956. He went to the district offices and looked at the original enrollment records himself, standing at a table in the records room with the bound ledger from 1955, open in front of him, running his finger down the column of names. He did not find the third student through any of those routes. What he found instead, in December 2002, through the researcher at the library and a filing index from the Los Angeles Unified Archive, was a document that changed the direction of the search entirely. A school transfer record from the spring of 1957, a child who had moved from Jefferson Elementary in Burbank to a school in Scottsdale, Arizona. The family name on the record was not a name Michael recognized immediately, but the first name on the transfer record was John. Michael sat with that for a week. He was 51 years old and had watched The Tonight Show with his mother every weeknight of his childhood and understood as soon as he saw the first name and the transfer year and the destination and did the arithmetic what he was probably looking at. He did not tell anyone. He checked the birth year in the district record against the public record. He checked the Scottsdale destination against the documented biography. He checked the autumn of 1955 against the known timeline of a 15-year-old who would have been in Burbank at that time. Everything matched. He found one more thing in his mother's box, tucked into the back of the 1955 attendance book, folded in half. A newspaper clipping from the Burbank Daily Review, dated 1972, a brief profile of local residents connected to the entertainment industry. One name circled in pencil, and in the margin, in his mother's careful handwriting, 2 words: I wonder. She had known, or come close enough to knowing that the distinction did not matter. She had sat with it for 30 years and had never said it to Michael, and had never said it to anyone. She had written a reply note to nobody, sealed it, kept it in a drawer. She had clipped a newspaper article, circled a name, written 2 words in the margin, and put it back in the attendance book. She had decided that if the person who sent the check had wanted to be known, they would have signed it. And she respected that the way she respected everything about the gesture, completely without reservation, for 31 years. Michael donated the contents of the envelope to the Burbank Historical Society in 2006. The note in his mother's handwriting sits in a case near the north wall. The card beside it reads, "Donated by Michael Marsh, in memory of his mother, Evelyn Ruth Marsh, 1909 to 2002. She taught 3rd grade in room 7 for 31 years. She stayed after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays whenever a child needed more time. She never kept records of it because she wanted it to be a response, not a policy. This is the response it produced. If this story reminded you of a teacher who stayed when they didn't have to, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. Subscribe for more stories about the man behind the desk. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to see how far this one travels. The note in his mother's handwriting, the unsent reply, sealed in its envelope, written to nobody, sits in a case near the north wall. Beside it, the cashier's check stub, the legal pad with 24 names and 3 circled, and the newspaper clipping with 2 words in the margin. The card beside the case reads, "Donated by Michael Marsh in memory of his mother, Evelyn Ruth Marsh, 1909 to 2002. She taught third grade in room 7 for 31 years. She stayed after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays whenever a child needed more time. She never kept records of it because she wanted it to be a response, not a policy. This is the response it produced. If this story reminded you of a teacher who stayed when they didn't have to, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. Subscribe for more stories about the man behind the desk. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to see how far this one travels.